Hello, and welcome to the Community IT Innovators Technology Topics Podcast, where we discuss nonprofit technology, cybersecurity, tech project implementation, strategic planning, and nonprofit IT careers. Find us at communityit.com. Thank you for joining Community IT for this podcast, Part 1. Subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and leave us a rating to help others find this leadership resource for nonprofits. Listen for Part 2 in your podcast feed.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Webinar Wednesday. Welcome to today's webinar, Nonprofit Tech Trends Leaders Need to Know About. My name is Kara Godleski, and I am the Marketing and Events Coordinator here at Nonprofit Hub. And I'm so glad y'all could join us for another great webinar. Also, I want to give a quick shout out to today's sponsor, Community IT. We are so lucky to have them joining us today. They offer IT support services for nonprofits who want to outsource some of their IT support. They help nonprofits plan, implement, and maintain dependable technology. They can take care of your IT system so you can accomplish your mission. So shout out to them and thank you. And a quick shout out to our platform partner, FireSpring, that provides strategic guidance through creative marketing and solutions to help nonprofits prosper. So with that being said, I will introduce our hosts for today, our presenters for today. We have Matt and Johan with us, and we're so excited to have them here. Matt is their Chief Technology Advisor at Community IT. He has quite a background in technology. He has very extensive knowledge on computer science, computer information systems. So he's going to be a great guide for us today. And Johan, he's always been interested in using technology as a force for good and how to improve the world. So that really fits into the nonprofit mission and how those kind of things really can coincide, how you can use tech for good. So we're so excited to have them join us today and dive into these tech trends that we need to know about. So without further ado, I'll let y'all take it away.
Great. Thank you so much, Kara. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us for this Ask the Experts panel on top 10 technology trends and tips that nonprofit need to know, especially nonprofit leadership. So we're so excited that you're here. If you're not familiar with our webinars, we're going to discuss technology that nonprofit executives, staff members, board members need to know. And we'll talk about it while defining the terminology and the lingo. So you'll be able to go back and talk to your IT director or IT providers about these tools and strategies and trends that we're expecting to continue to influence nonprofit technology. If you're running your own nonprofit, maybe a startup, we're going to talk also about tools you can use right now and strategies and just ways to think about the interaction of technology with your nonprofit mission. So the learning objectives for today are that after this session, you'd be able to describe 10 major nonprofit trends and tips. Learn the terminology and definitions that are common, understand the role of executives and staff in managing IT outcomes and strategic planning, even if you are not the IT person, and know where to go for some additional resources on nonprofit tech. So as Kara mentioned, we're going to be sending out an email after this with some links, and we have a website that you can go to where we have a lot of free resources as well. So I want to make sure everyone knows that Community IT is vendor agnostic. This presentation, we're going to be discussing some specific tools, but we wouldn't make recommendations except to our clients when we know what their business needs are that are more specific. But we want to share with you like some basic things that are out there. And yes, as Kara said, we encourage you to submit your questions and comments through the chat feature, but we probably won't be able to get to everything, so you can always contact us afterward to follow up. So Johan, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's a real pleasure to speak with you all. My name is Johan Hammerstrom. I'm the CEO at Community IT. I've been with Community IT for almost 23 years. So it's been so long that when I first started doing IT support, the internet was something you accessed over a telephone line, and software was something you installed from a CD or a floppy disk. So I've seen a lot of changes in the world of technology in my career. And this is a particularly exciting time for nonprofits as they use technology to accomplish their mission. So that's something that we're really passionate about at Community IT, and something that we're really looking forward to talking with you all about today.
Great. Welcome. My name is Matt Eshelman. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at Community IT. I've been with the organization for full-time, a little over 20 years, and in my role as CTO, really responsible for driving our technology strategy and tools that we use to manage about 6,000 endpoints across our 170 nonprofit clients, and also work to develop our cybersecurity strategy and implementation. So looking forward to talking about how some of those things are carried out today, and looking forward to the conversation and any questions that we get as we go along.
Great. Thanks, Matt. And so my name's Carolyn, and I'm the Marketing and Outreach Director for Community IT. So I'm happy to help with this presentation and help our experts. Before we begin, if you're not familiar with Community IT, a little bit more about us. We are a 100% employee-owned managed services provider. So we provide outsourced IT support. We work exclusively with nonprofits, and our mission is to help nonprofits accomplish your missions through the effective use of technology. We serve nonprofits across the United States, and we've been doing this for over 20 years. We are technology experts, and we are consistently given the MSP 501 recognition for being a top MSP, which is an honor we received again in 2022. So we have a lot of free resources on our website, including videos, articles, free downloads. We have a weekly podcast on technology topics for nonprofits. And we really just think the more nonprofits learn about nonprofit IT, the better you can accomplish your mission. All right, so we're going to go to the agenda, which looks like a lot, so don't worry. It's a lot to take in, but you're in the right place. We're going to break it down for you and talk about what you need to know to match up your business needs with your tech needs at any stage of growth of your nonprofit. So if you have an IT department, an IT director, if you have outsourced IT, as a nonprofit leader, you still need to know some of these basic concepts and be thoughtful about your IT strategy. And that's going to give your organization an advantage and maybe even keep you from some financial problems if you have a cyberware attack, that sort of thing. So we're going to divide our talk today up into 4 sections. Johan is going to start us out with a quick overview of basics around budgeting for IT, which I think is something we all need to jump into and know how to think about as an opportunity, strategic decisions, and also just ways to understand the costs. Then we're going to talk a little bit about long-term trends you can expect over the next few years. And then Matt is here, our CTO, to talk about cybersecurity, insurance, and how to protect your nonprofit. And then to wrap it up, Johan and Matt are going to touch on some changes to office operations that we've seen since the start of the pandemic, and we really do expect to continue to grow in importance. So it's a big agenda with a lot to cover, and we're going to be sharing resources at the end. So to begin, Johan is going to talk about budgeting, and we have a little poll to get things going. So I hope they can launch the poll. Johan, do you want to read the options for people?
Yeah, so go ahead and respond to the poll with the option that best describes your situation. A couple of different scenarios here. Whoever's in charge of your finances, CFO, Director of Finance, just takes last year's amount spent and increases it slightly or keeps it the same. Or do you have number 2, option 2, a leadership team that meets with different departments in your organization to talk about the overall strategy and roadmap for IT and develop a budget from that strategy? Do you not have a budget and just replace things when they break or fix things when they break. That's number 3. Number 4, do you outsource your IT and aren't sure how the money is being spent and are just sort of going in from invoice to invoice? Or number 5, do you not know? Are you not sure? So we got about 2/3 of the audience has responded, 3/4. This is great. Thank you all for taking the time to respond to the poll. And right now, I think you can all see the results, but the majority of you have answered, about 1/3 of the respondents have answered number 5, not sure, not applicable. And of the remaining 2/3, only about 15% have an intentionally planned and designed budget. So we'll talk about the importance of the budget, and we're going to provide you with some guidance on things that you can do to develop your IT budget. So we can go ahead and close the poll and move on to the next slide. So budgeting is critical. It's an important and necessary part of using technology effectively and ensuring that IT is meeting the overall needs of the organization and helping your nonprofit organization in accomplishing its mission. And the nature of the budgeting process is really going to vary based on the size and complexity of your organization. So very large organizations with hundreds of staff, multiple departments, sort of sophisticated financial management systems in place are going to have a more complicated and formalized budgeting process. Smaller organizations, maybe your organization only has 10 to 20 staff, are going to have a much less complicated budgeting process. But regardless of the complexity and scope of your budgeting, these are some steps that you see here on the slide that we feel are useful in all scenarios. These 4 steps are something that you can go through and adapt to your organization's specific budgeting process. And the first step is really the preparation. And that's something that if you've already been building an IT budget each year, you may have already been doing these steps without necessarily realizing it. If you haven't put an IT budget together before, then these are some of the things that you can do to get all the information that you need to put together an accurate budget. So the first step, preparation, start with an assessment. Understand what it is that you have as an organization, pull together an inventory of all of your equipment, particularly your laptops and workstations that your staff are using. You want to inventory all the different information systems that you're using. Do you use Microsoft 365 to communicate? Do you use Google Workspace email for communication? Are you using Slack for chatting? Do you use Zoom for your meetings? Do you use Teams? Just list all of that out so that you understand the specific IT systems that are being used by the organization. Different ways that you can get that information. You can send a survey out to your staff. You can just ask people, if you're a small enough organization, what is it that they're using. But getting that comprehensive list together in advance is really helpful. You do want to look at your previous IT spend. That's not always a great guide as to what you should be spending in future years, but it can also help you with assessing your existing IT infrastructure. And then finally, you want to look at your overall business plan. So your organization's plan. What is the organization going to do over the coming year, 1 to 3 years, really? Does the organization have plans for growth? Is it going to be expanding into new markets, new regions? Is it going to be adding new programs? Is there a large grant that you're going after that you have a good sense that you're going to get that will allow you to do additional program work? All of those things are going to be important to incorporate into the budget for the coming year. So once you've assessed your existing systems, once you've looked at what you've been spending in the past, and once you've factored in the impact of the organization's overall plans, strategic plans for the coming year, then you can put together a draft budget. And we'll talk on the next slide about sort of a framework for thinking about different budget categories in your draft. Once you've drafted the budget, Then you have to go through a prioritization process, and that's where you take what you'd like to do for the organization in terms of IT, and then balance that with what the organization's capable of. Because as we all know, nonprofits have resource constraints, and they can't always invest in all of the technology that they would like to. So prioritizing is a pretty critical part of the budgeting process. And then once that budget is completed and approved by the senior leadership, and in some cases by the board, the nonprofit board, then that budget can be used to develop a plan where you outline when the spending is going to happen. And that can help you with developing an IT roadmap, which is really useful for ensuring that your IT systems are set up and implemented in a way that benefits everybody and helps the organization. So let's talk a little bit about IT budget categories. I like to think of IT budget categories in these 4 different buckets. And I think this helps. You can take the assessment that you did, the inventory that you put together, and then categorize the different aspects of your IT into these different categories. So the first is personnel, and that's really who's providing the IT support for the organization. For larger organizations, you may have an in-house IT team, and their payroll costs would fit into that category. For smaller organizations, you may be outsourcing your IT to a third-party provider, and those costs would go under personnel as well. So it's essentially the cost of the staff that are required to keep IT running. The second category are hardware costs, which these days, especially with a lot of organizations working remotely, are generally workstation, laptop costs. If organizations are maintaining an office or thinking about going back into their office, it could include things like wireless access points, printers, copiers, audiovisual systems. Those are the sorts of things that fall into hardware. Software is essentially, these days, software is almost entirely in the cloud. There are some software applications that organizations still use that are installed locally, but there are licensing costs associated with those. So if you're using the Office desktop suite, there's a licensing cost associated with that you would want to make sure you're including in your budget. If you're using cloud-based infrastructure, such as Azure, if you're a larger organization, you would want to put that in this category as well. So there's been a sort of overlap between categories 3 and 4 as more and more software moves into the cloud and really becomes software as a service. But we think it's helpful to continue to categorize those expenditures as software expenditures. And then finally, there's services. And these are things like your internet service at your office. If your organization is providing stipends to staff to help cover some of the cost of their home internet if they're working from home, or their cell phone costs if they're using their cell phone for business, that would fall into this category, as well as other types of services costs. So in terms of prioritizing, this is a very simple, straightforward way of thinking about how to prioritize your IT expenditures. And it's sort of, the concept is sort of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where you have to fulfill the needs at the bottom of the pyramid first before you're in a place where you can fulfill the needs higher up the pyramid. And at the base is the hardware. If the hardware for your staff isn't working, if the laptops are old and out of date, if you're not providing laptops for your staff, it's going to be very hard for them to do their work. So we recommend prioritizing the hardware refresh first and foremost in the budget. It's important to maintain your existing licenses. So that is also something that needs to be prioritized once you've spent on refreshing the hardware. And then once you've addressed your existing IT spending needs, then you can start to look at spending on new initiatives, new IT solutions, new software as a service, new security initiatives. But this is the basic approach that we take to prioritizing IT spend. So that's just a real quick overview of budgeting. We actually have a webinar on our website that spends a whole hour talking about budgeting, so you can find out more information there. And of course, we're available and happy to answer any questions at the end of today's webinar if you have more specific questions about IT budgeting.
Great. Thank you, Johan. I know it's hard to just compact it, but you did a great job covering that kind of the ideas of how to do a budget and include IT in it. Which is a good segue into long-term trends that we can expect over the next few years. And these are the types of trends that should guide some of your budget decision making. So how much are you going to be in the cloud? How much are people going to be working remotely? Those types of decisions for your long-term plan. And I would just want to mention here that if you have an IT director or a CIO or a CTO, then you may already be making a roadmap of your technology needs and strategizing those needs in your budgeting process. Community IT provides this service to our clients through an IT business manager, which is a fairly senior position that acts as a manager, basically. So they can act as an IT director for our clients, helping match those IT needs to your budget and your strategy. We also can help if on the help desk, if we're seeing like a bunch of a similar type of problem come in, maybe it's around hardware, then that's something that our IT business manager can help you, our clients work on strategizing those budget so that we are addressing maybe hardware issues that are coming up again and again. So it's just a way to help our clients be forward looking and be taking a lot of this stuff into account when you're working on your budget and working on your IT. So now Johan and Matt are going to briefly review a couple of the areas where we've seen changes and where we're going to continue to see these trends.
So I think the big trend that we've seen over the past 2 years with the response to the COVID pandemic is around remote work. I think that was a big transition that a lot of organizations had to scramble for to prepare. I think as we kind of come out of the COVID kind of work remote model, we're seeing many organizations adopt a hybrid approach. But not everyone is going back into the office. Even organizations, I think, that have established return to work programs, I think, are having challenges with that adoption. I think we certainly see it with our organizations. The ones that have established the return to work, it's relatively limited, and I think staff have, in general, for a lot of the knowledge worker positions, have preferred to be at home, preferred to work remotely, and I think. We've seen organizations make that as a transition and adopt that as a virtual organization model, which I think carries with it a little bit of a different IT mindset than having an office with a physical space with all of the resources that go onto it. I think if you're an organization that's in that transition period as well, we've also seen that there's a lot of challenges in getting the office space ready for that return to work as staff have been remote over the past 2+ years. And so a lot of the things that maybe were working or were set up and configured when people left now need to be refreshed or updated in order to support staff as they come back into the office. I think for us, we are fortunate in that a lot of our tools are work kind of cloud centric and cloud enabled. And I think especially as organizations become more distributed, making sure that the support systems are in place to support support the staff wherever they happen to be, whether physically in an office location or at their home or back and forth, is I think is a element that needs to be considered. And then making sure that your IT policies and procedures are in place to support that. So policies tend to be the last thing on everybody's list, but they are a critical resource when helping to define just what the expectations are, what resources are going to be provided to staff, and what the expectations are around the use of personal technology or organizational technology as well. And I think finally, the transition into a remote workforce has introduced some unique cybersecurity concerns as well. Kind of in the before days, whenever you came to the office behind a firewall, everything was relatively straightforward, and there wasn't a lot of migration of resources. Now the network perimeter is much more expansive. And so now, instead of just considering, is the firewall at the office up to date? Do we have good practices and security procedures in place at our physical office location? Now the network security boundary is everybody in their home and their home office. And so are all of those firewalls up to date? Is there adequate internet? Is there adequate support? How are we ensuring the security of devices that that we can't really see or get our hands on? So it does require a change in mindset and the use of tooling to make sure that you can support organizations regardless of the location. And as Kara just chatted in, please feel free, if there's questions, go ahead and use the chat, and we'll have some time here at the end as we go through the presentation.
Johan, I think you wanted to talk about this slide.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think, we've been big fans of the cloud over the last 10 years, really moving information into the cloud, having email hosted by Microsoft rather than in your closet at your office has been a huge improvement with regards to reliability and functionality. I think one of the challenges and opportunities really that's emerging with this shift to hosting information in the cloud it's a combination of things. For one thing, there's the question of integrating the data. So you may be using Microsoft for email communication. You may be using Slack for chatting, both internally and with external partners. And you may be using Salesforce to manage your fundraising database or provide for your case management system. And so you've got information in all of these different cloud-hosted systems. How do you connect them with one another? How do you integrate them so that the information can be put to better use? So this is a big challenge that we're seeing and we're starting to see more and more of, but it also creates an opportunity. Organizations that are able to integrate data across different systems are able to use it more effectively and report on it, combine it into reporting that can be delivered to funders and to the organization's board. So there's a lot of potential in getting a hold of data integration and being intentional about it. One of the other nice things about these new systems is the degree to which they can create automated workflows and the degree to which they can reinforce and support business process. And so you can set up and encode the process in the system so that if the process is basically being followed, by everyone in the organization. So that's a new feature that a lot of these systems are providing that organizations can use. One of the last two bullets on this slide are really interrelated. One of the challenges of having all of these cloud-based systems is you've got logins for all these different systems. You've got one login for Google, you've got another login for Slack, another one for Zoom, another one for Salesforce or Razor's Edge. That's a security risk because now you're maintaining multiple passwords for all of these different systems, but it's also a major inconvenience for staff. So single sign-on is something that's provided by Microsoft, by Google, by third-party providers such as Okta, and it can really help in providing a single interface for accessing all of these different systems. So that's a real trend. That's something we've seen a lot of organizations implementing, creates greater security protections. It helps with provisioning, and it also creates an easier, more efficient way of logging into systems for the staff of an organization. So one of the other things that we've also noticed with our clients is the increased need for IT policies and procedures. And I think this is a reflection of the increasing importance of IT in the work that organizations do. And so having a good acceptable use policy that's part of the employee handbook, that's provided to staff on their first day, and that's maybe reinforced with staff over time, is really important in helping protect the organization from things like staff using organization devices for doing personal work, or perhaps using organization systems for storing personal information. So having a good acceptable use policy is really important. As Matt talked about earlier, more organizations are working remotely, allowing or requiring their staff to work remotely. Having a good remote work policy is really important. Specifying in a policy what constitutes a productive home and work environment is something that you want to state clearly for your staff. If you're going to allow staff to use their mobile devices to access work information, you also want to make sure that those policies are clear and that you've implemented the technology in a way that supports those policies. It's important to have a data protection policy, so having it clearly stated in writing that staff are not permitted to share information outside of the organization. It's very easy to do that these days, easier than it's ever been. And a lot of organizations just don't have that as a stated policy, so that if there ever are issues, they can't go back and say, well, we clearly stated that this is something that employees are not allowed to do. So, and that's just one example of a host of items that would be included on a data protection policy. Application management policy, who's responsible for creating and managing user accounts in the different applications. That's a security issue, it's a governance issue, and it's something that organizations should think about. If you're not sure where to start with some of these things, you can work with an outsourced IT support provider. Really good support providers are already thinking about these issues. They're not just fixing your IT solutions, they're helping you develop a holistic approach to managing IT, which is what all of these policies and procedures are really aimed at. Finally, we recommend that organizations have a disaster recovery plan, an incident response plan, and an IT support and training policy, so that these are things that also would inform the budget. Now, how much are you going to invest in a disaster recovery system? How much are you going to invest in cybersecurity? How much are you going to invest in providing IT support and training to your staff? These are all things that would get defined by the senior leadership of the organization, potentially in conjunction with the board. And then once defined, they represent they basically represent what the organization is committing to, and then that can be used to inform budget and investment. So
I would just say I wanted to piggyback on a little bit on the disaster recovery plan and incident response. I think, with so many resources moving out to the cloud, I think there's been some sense of it's, kind of out of sight, out of mind. The cloud provider must be taking care of it. And I think developing that disaster recovery plan is a really good exercise to help test some of those assumptions. What happens if your data gets corrupted in your cloud database? Like, are you able to recover it? How are you able to recover it? To what degree is that cloud vendor providing backups? How far back do they go? And then just run those as different scenarios to say, can we recover a corrupted file? Can we recover 1,000 corrupted files? Can we recover 50,000 corrupted records? What does that process look like to make sure that expectation is set clearly and communicated well across the organization? So, some of the, what's old is new again, the deliberate care that you would take if that database or that file system was on-premise, I think still needs to be applied, even if the organization has moved a lot of those resources into the cloud and has all this great integration and workflow. Still make sure that those systems are tested and not just assumed.
I think that's a great point, Matt. And I think we have seen some of our clients that exercise of getting a committee together and creating that disaster response plan for their IT helps them, organize their thinking around it and their strategy toward it and how much they're going to budget to it. And also just having that list of phone numbers, like who do you call first? And then who do you call next? And that needs to be something that you can't respond to it if you're not prepared for it.
Thank you for joining Community IT for this podcast, Part 1. Subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and leave us a rating to help others find this leadership resource for nonprofits. Listen for Part 2 in your podcast feed. Community IT does these free webinars and podcasts for our community, and we love sharing our knowledge and experience. If you have more questions or are having trouble with your IT at your nonprofit, please get in touch with us on our website, www.communityit.com, so we can start a conversation or schedule an assessment. Downloading any of our free resources there will get you signed up for our webinar reminders, and you can attend our next webinar in real time and ask our experts your own questions. If you love podcasts, please subscribe and leave us a rating to help others find this leadership resource for nonprofits.